Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining for our first impromptu Ask Me Anything video. What does the public charge rule mean for immigrants? If you enjoy this video, please take a moment to look at our previous Ask Me Anything videos here on HIAS PA's Facebook page. I'm Daniella Scruggs, Development Director of HIAS Pennsylvania, subbing in for Catherine Miller-Wilson. HIAS Pennsylvania is a nonprofit whose mission is to provide legal and social services to immigrants and refugees. Our conversation today is to help individuals understand the new public charge rules going into effect on October 15. We want to make sure that everyone understands how the rule might affect them before they might take actions that might affect their family's livelihood. Thanks to everyone who has submitted questions already. We are excited for our conversation today. If you haven't already done so, you can submit any questions you have during the next half hour in the comments sections below. If we don't get to them during this live conversation, we'll answer them in the comments. We'd also love to hear your ideas for topics on future videos, and we hope that through this video series, you can learn all you need to know about immigration and refugee resettlement in the United States. Today, we are excited to be speaking with two attorneys who work every day to help immigrants. Maripat Pileggi has been a staff attorney in Community Legal Services Public Benefits Unit since 2007. In that time, she has become the Philadelphia expert in understanding the complicated intersections between immigration statuses and public benefits. Mary Clark is HIAS Pennsylvania's PCAN coordinator, a Philadelphia collaboration that provides citizen services across the city. She has been working in immigration since graduating law school in 2009. So I'll start with a question for me. What does public charge mean, and why does it affect people's immigration status?
So public charge has been a part of immigration law for a really long time, since the 1800s. And what that law says is that some people can have their applications for visas or green cards denied if immigration officials find that that individual is likely to become a public charge. When immigration officials make that decision about whether someone is likely to become a public charge, we sometimes call this the public charge test. The current rule that's in effect today defines public charge, and the current rule has been around since 1999. The current rule that we have in effect today defines public charge as someone who is likely to become primarily dependent on the government for really basic subsistence. But that rule is changing starting October 15th.
So we've had the public charge rule, like you said, for a really long time. What's happening with this new rule?
Yeah. So for a really long time, the government has defined this term public charge in a really restrictive way to really only include people who are living in very deep poverty or people who are living in institutions like nursing homes. But we know that on August 14th, the Department of Homeland Security published a new rule that will redefine the term public charge. And that new definition of public charge will go into effect on October 15th. And so what that new definition of public charge is someone who's likely to use things like food stamps to buy food, housing subsidies to pay rent, or medical assistance to go to doctor's appointments and buy medicines. So this is a much more expansive definition of the term public charge, and will include even some people who are working and have incomes above the poverty line. So it won't just include those people living in very deep poverty that we have today under the current policy. It will be expanded to include more people with higher incomes. So because it will include more people with higher incomes, this new rule can be used to deny more people green cards or visas that they would otherwise be eligible to receive.
So from an immigration standpoint, the current rule was really focused on in cases of people petitioning for family members, the petitioner's income, and how the petitioner would be able to support family members coming over. And if someone was able to show that they were able to financially support someone that they were sponsoring, or get a family member or a friend to show that they could help support, that would usually be sufficient. Now the rule is going to be changing, and there's going to be a 5-factor test. The sponsors, with a form that was called the affidavit of support, will also be used, but it's a 5-factor test, really looking at the age, health, family status, assets, and education of the immigrant themselves. So their either use of public benefits or potential use of public benefits in the future is going to be part of that calculation as to whether or not there's someone that's more likely or not to be a public charge in the future.
So the public charge rule is going to affect kind of 2 kinds of immigration, right? For people here in the United States who are applying for green cards, and also for people who are trying to get mostly family members from abroad. Can you talk about, for specifically the people who are here already in the United States and worried about their green card or citizenship, how is this public charge going to affect them, and who is not affected?
So the current rule is only for applications in the US. We expect a rule to come into play for consular processing, meaning people who are coming in from abroad, very soon in the future. So for people in the US, the public charge rule is only applicable to certain people. There are certain categories of individuals who are completely exempt from the rule, and then certain individuals for whom the rule just doesn't apply. So first I want to talk about who's exempt from the rule, meaning who may be applying for an extension of their status or a green card, and this rule simply does not apply to them. That would be refugees, asylees, people who are applying for asylum, people who are applying for U visas for victims of crime, people who are applying for trafficking visas, immigrants who are victims of domestic violence and are applying for visas and green cards based on that, special immigrant juveniles, certain Cuban and Haitian entrants, and individuals applying under the Cuban Adjustment Act. This is a partial list of people for whom this does not apply to, meaning if you're a refugee, an asylee, anyone else I mentioned, receiving public benefits is not going to negatively affect you under this public charge rule. Similarly, for folks who have green cards already, there is no public charge test to keeping your green card. There is no public charge test to becoming a US citizen. And so this rule doesn't apply to you. That said, if you are traveling outside of the country for 6 months or more and you have a green card, you could be deemed as someone who's applying for admission when you come back into the country because your trip may be considered too long, in which case the public charge test could apply to you. So if you have your green card, we would recommend not traveling for more than 6 months at a time, certainly if you're someone who thinks that the public charge test may apply to you. Also, I want to say another caveat, which is for all the folks who are exempted, assuming that they do not apply for a green card based on a family-based petition, the public charge rule doesn't apply. Meaning if you're an asylee and you get your green card based on asylum, you're a refugee, you get your green card based on being a refugee, the public charge test does not apply to you.
So should someone who's a refugee or an asylee be afraid that this might change in the future?
So I would say no. The current rule is a rule specifically for people who aren't already exempted. The exemptions that I talked about are written in law, meaning for those exemptions to change, Congress would actually need to change the law. Similarly, the current rule does not apply to benefits received in the past. It applies to benefits received October 15th and going forward. We would expect that any rule that could change would also be going forward as opposed to going backwards. So we would encourage folks who are in those exempted categories not to get themselves off of benefits and not to be fearful of remaining on those benefits if they need it for their family.
Okay. What about if someone has a child that's receiving benefits, but they are not? Would that affect them?
So the current rule does not apply to benefits received by family members, period. So if an immigrant is applying for a family-based petition and is worried about the public charge, if their family members are receiving it, that won't affect their ability to pass the test.
So kind of going back, you said these rules are not quite in effect yet, but let's say that you are planning to get your mother or your brother from abroad trying to petition for them to come into the United States. How would the public charge potentially affect that?
So the rule, like we said, goes into effect October 15th. Applications submitted before October 15th will fall under the old rule, meaning any applications that are submitted before that date, the new rule won't apply to them.
So pretty much if you want to do it, apply as soon as
Absolutely,
possible.
because the new rule for most folks is going to be more beneficial than the old rule. I mean, sorry, the old rule is going to be more beneficial than the new rule. Sorry. So certainly apply now if you believe that you are eligible to petition for a family member. Also remember that only benefits received before October 15th will count under the benefits calculation. And so if you're at all concerned that maybe you don't fit an exemption, that the rule would apply to you, talk to an expert, talk to an immigration attorney to see if maybe that's something you should get off or not, because getting off something like medical assistance when you don't need to can be life-threatening for people.
So if you're an immigrant and worried about the public charge rule, what should you do?
I think there are a few things to keep in mind. The first is, are you subject to public charge at all, right? And as Mary explained, there are lots and lots of people who just have no public charge risk whatsoever, right? Refugees, asylees are exempt. Many other people are exempt. There is no public charge test for the U.S. citizenship application process. Most people with green cards don't have anything to worry about. So there are lots and lots of people out there who just have no reason to worry about this at all. So that's the first thing. And if you're unsure about whether public charge applies to you, there are attorneys who are here willing to help at Community Legal Services if you have questions about public benefits, at HIAS if you have questions about your immigration status. So that's the first thing. But if you are somebody who will need to pass a public charge test in order to get a visa or a green card here in the U.S., there's still a way forward for you. First, as we already talked about, only your receipt of public benefits can be counted against you. There is no reason for anybody to be pulling their kids off of benefits or their spouses off of benefits. That's not going to change anything in terms of the public charge test that you, as a green card or visa applicant, will have to pass. Second, it's not all public benefits that are implicated in this new rule. There are only some. So food stamps can be counted against you. So if you are applying for a green card and you are subject to a public charge test, your receipt of food stamps could be counted against you. But keep in mind that almost everyone who is eligible for food stamps is exempt from public charge. So there are very, very, very few people who have any reason to stop getting food stamps if they are eligible for them. Housing subsidies can be counted under the new rule. But again, just like food stamps, pretty much everyone who is eligible for housing subsidies is exempt from public charge. So there are very few people who have any actual reason to pull themselves off of housing subsidies. Medical assistance also is one of the new benefits that can be counted against folks during the public charge test. But there are lots of exemptions. So medical assistance for pregnant women cannot be counted. Medical assistance for kids under the age 21 cannot be counted. Medical assistance for people with emergency medical conditions cannot be counted. Medical assistance that is purely state funded cannot be counted. So that's a lot. That's a lot of different kinds of medical assistance that cannot be counted. And again, kind of the bottom line here is that if you are eligible for public benefits, there's a really, really, really good chance that you are exempt from public charge. And there is no reason to take yourself off of your benefits. Nothing else can be counted. Nothing besides the food stamps, the housing subsidies, and the medical assistance. So WIC cannot be counted. CHIP cannot be counted. Marketplace subsidies cannot be counted. Unemployment compensation, workers' compensation. These are all benefits that are generally available to a significant number of immigrants, and all of those folks can continue to receive those benefits without public charge risk. So, and I think the last thing to keep in mind is that even if you are subject to a public charge test and you're getting benefits, talk with an immigration lawyer. There's a really good chance that even if you are getting public benefits, your immigration attorney can help you prove that you are not a public charge, even if you're getting public benefits, I think.
Yeah. So one thing I want to mention as well, we've certainly been getting a lot of calls from folks who've either taken themselves off of benefits when they didn't need to, or have called us asking, should I do this? Because they've been scared by what's in the news. One other point to make, fee waivers for immigration applications in general are not going to negatively affect you either. So if someone's applying for citizenship and is worried about filing a fee waiver to not have to pay the $725 citizenship fee, that is not going to have a negative effect on them. Or if they petition for a family member in the future, that shouldn't have a negative effect on them. That's something I want to point out.
So, who would you consider really being the new group of people affected by this rule? Because you've just talked about all the people who really, if they're getting public benefits, they are already exempt. Who should be more careful when thinking about this?
Yeah, so I think who's going to be most affected by this are going to be people who are recipients of family-based petitions. The overwhelming majority of people who are going to be affected by this rule are that. They're probably not going to be people who have applied for or received public benefits in the past because they wouldn't have been eligible for them. Certainly the ones that are counted here. But they're going to be low-income folks who maybe can't pass those other parts of the test. So like I said, age. If someone's under 18 or over 60, that's going to be counted as a negative factor against them. If someone doesn't have job prospects and they're not a full-time student, that might be counted against them. If someone doesn't have a household income that's above certain levels of the poverty level, that will be counted against them. So it's not just about public benefits at the end of the day. It's about whether or not someone can pass that test and can prove that there's someone who's not going to become a public charge once they get their green card or change their status here in the U.S.
So for both of you, if there was one message that you think people should get after watching this video, what would that be?
I think the main message from my perspective is understand what it is before you take any action. So if you think it may affect you, talk to someone before you get yourself off benefits. I mean, we're talking about medical assistance, we're talking about insurance, we're talking about food stamps for families and kids. These are really important benefits that people may be receiving. Make sure that you actually need to get off them before you do. And certainly if you're on the list of the categories that we talked about, asylees, refugees, victims of domestic violence, if you are in one of those categories, don't get yourself off of benefits because you probably don't need to.
Just thinking, if for anybody out there who's working in eligibility, public benefits eligibility for immigrants, if you lined up kind of the groups of immigrants who are eligible for these benefits and you matched them to the groups of immigrants who are exempt, they match almost identically. So it is highly, highly likely that if you are eligible for any of the public benefits implicated in this new rule, that you have no public charge risk. I've been hearing a lot from folks still wondering if they should be taking their U.S. citizen kids off of public benefits because they're scared that if their kids continue to receive those benefits, it'll create a public charge problem for them in the future. The answer to that is unequivocally no. So this new rule is very explicit about that in ways that even the old policy was not. The better old policy was not as clear about when or whether family members' receipt of benefits can be counted against a green card applicant. This rule is very clear, right? I think part of the reason people are so confused about that point in particular is because there were some leaked drafts of this rule that were kind of circulating around the media for months and months before the official rule was published. That said, that kids' benefits would be counted against their parents. But that went away, right? It wasn't in the proposed rule, and it was not in the final rule as it was published on August 14th. So people should be really clear about that, that their kids and their spouses and anybody else who they live with in their family can continue to receive benefits they're eligible for without risk.
So far, this rule is supposed to go into effect on October 15th. Is there any likelihood that this does not go into effect October 15th?
So there are currently lawsuits that may delay the implementation of the final rule. So folks should certainly, pay attention to how those proceed. Another takeaway is certainly that none of this is applicable until the 15th at the earliest. So if you have a family petition that you're getting ready to file, do it now. If you have benefits that you're not sure about, check on it before the 15th at the very earliest.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, since we don't have any other questions, I want to thank both of you for those enlightening answers. I'm just going to reiterate the takeaways from my perspective, which is if you are receiving public benefits, the ones in this new rule, you are likely also exempt from this public charge rule. So there is there's little likelihood that you need to cancel your benefits. I'm just going to confirm that.
Yeah.
And that the biggest effect of this new public charge rule will be on family petitions. So if you're planning on getting any of your family members to petition for them to come from abroad, then you should do that before October 15th, and then it will be easier. So I just wanted to reconfirm that. And I want to thank everyone who sends their questions. If any of you still have questions, please reach out to HIAS Pennsylvania or CLS, and we will try to make sure that you are given correct answers and don't just follow the media who has sometimes been misleading in the past about this. I also want to tell everyone to stay tuned to HIAS Pennsylvania's next Ask Me Anything, which is going to be on Thursday, October 3rd, again at 4 p.m. We're going to be talking to a Philadelphia native and a HIAS Pennsylvania refugee client who came together through our Philly Neighbor program, which is one of our volunteer programs. They are Olga Lipshin and Leonardo Zumzum. As always, you can learn more about how to support asylum seekers and other immigrants and refugees at hiaspa.org. And if you want to learn more about Maripat and CLS, please go to clsphila.org. Thank you guys again, and we look forward to having you again at our next Ask Me Anything.